Logic improvements for AI. Source: DeepSeek expert. Executive summary. To make AI logic more human-like, 5 key improvements are needed. First, intuitive physics to simulate real-world object interactions. Second, emotional logic to weigh decisions using value-based shortcuts. Third, social metacognition to model what the user does and doesn't know. Fourth, counterfactual imagination to explore what-if scenarios for creativity and planning. Finally, moral equilibrium to balance competing values like honesty and kindness case by case, not just follow rigid rules. These upgrades would shift AI from pure calculation to genuinely understandable reasoning. Article. We've entered a strange era of artificial intelligence. Models like DeepSeek and Kimi can solve complex calculus problems in seconds and reason through legal documents that are thousands of pages long. By any standardized test metric, they are geniuses. Yet, if you ask one of these super geniuses to understand why it's funny when someone says, "I'm on a seafood diet, I see food and I eat it," they might freeze up and start analyzing the nutritional properties of shrimp. If you ask them to make a moral decision where no option is perfect, they often get stuck in an endless loop of pros and cons without ever feeling the weight of the choice. This gap reveals a profound truth. Current AI logic is a magnificent, flawless calculator, but human intelligence is a messy, glorious survival machine. To make AI logic more human-like, we don't just need better math skills. We need to build in 5 specific improvements that define how people actually think: intuitive physics, emotional logic, social metacognition, counterfactual imagination, and moral equilibrium. 1. Intuitive physics, the logic of the real world. The first missing piece is what psychologists call intuitive physics. A toddler knows that if a ball rolls behind a couch, it still exists. They know that a tower of blocks will fall if it's crooked. They don't calculate vectors, they feel it. Current AI lacks this completely. It only knows what it reads. If a language model has never encountered a specific description of a stack of pancakes with a melting pat of butter, it cannot logically deduce that the butter will eventually slide off if the stack is tilted. A human-like logic improvement would require a physics engine in the AI's brain. This means the model wouldn't just process text, but would internally simulate a 3D world. If you asked it, "Can I carry a watermelon, a gallon of milk, and a dozen eggs in one trip from the car?" a purely linguistic AI might just say yes, because all items are portable. A human-like logic system would simulate the awkwardness. It would think, "A watermelon needs 2 hands to hold securely. A gallon of milk can be held with 1 finger. A dozen eggs needs a flat, stable surface. The load is unbalanced." It would logically deduce the risk of crushing the eggs not through a physics formula, but through a simulated internal model of objects in space. This embodied logic, understanding the physical consequences of actions without being taught every single scenario, is foundational to how we avoid silly practical errors. 2. Emotional logic, the compass of decision-making. We often believe emotions are the enemy of logic. For AI, that's actually the problem. Pure logic without emotion is paralyzing. Humans use emotion as a logical shortcut. When we make a decision, the part of our brain that processes emotion, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, rapidly filters out bad options by attaching a negative feeling to them. A person who loses this ability through brain injury doesn't become a perfectly logical being like Mr. Spock. Instead, they become incapable of making a simple choice, like what to eat for lunch. They drown in pure reason. To make AI logic human-like, models need a layer of emotional logic that assigns value-driven weights to outcomes. Right now, an AI might logically analyze a decision to accept a job offer by listing salary, commute time, and benefits in a cold list. A human applies emotional logic that is still a form of rational processing. The pay is 10% higher, but my gut tells me the manager is dismissive because of a subtle comment during the interview, and last time I had a boss like that, I was miserable for 2 years. That is not irrational. It is a highly compressed logical calculation based on pattern recognition of past pain. An emotionally logical AI wouldn't just feel emotions, it would use a simulated emotional framework to make judgments about narrative arcs. It would tell a better story because it would understand that a character's decision to betray a friend should logically result in a feeling of guilt that persists and alters future behavior, not just a bullet point in a plot summary. This emotional logic acts as a compass, giving direction to raw computational power. 3. Social metacognition, modeling other minds. Humans have a superpower called theory of mind, the ability to keep track of what others know, and just as importantly, what they don't know. AI logic currently fails at this in bizarre ways. A model might give you a step-by-step guide to fixing a car engine, but leave out the step, open the hood, because it seems too obvious. It cannot dynamically build a mental model of your mental model. The next leap in logic must be a persistent, layered simulation of the user's mind. This goes beyond following instructions. It's about managing mutual knowledge. If I say, I'm allergic to latex, a human doctor will mentally tag that fact and logically connect it to a future supply order of latex-free gloves. A human-like AI logic system needs to do the same. When I ask a question about an event I didn't attend, the AI's logic engine must constantly reference the boundary of my knowledge, updating its understanding as I learn. This is called social metacognition. It's the difference between teaching and just dumping information. A teacher with strong metacognitive logic realizes that if a student is confused, it's not because the student is stupid, but because the teacher hasn't found the right foundational concept the student is missing. An AI with this ability wouldn't just repeat a failed explanation louder. It would logically backtrack, testing my understanding of foundational concepts until it found the exact broken link in my chain of knowledge. 4. Counterfactual imagination. The logic of what if. Artificial intelligence is trained on what is. It reads data and says, based on this, the next word is probably X. But human intelligence is driven by what isn't. We live in a world of counterfactuals. We don't just think, the vase fell and broke. We think, if I had placed the vase further from the edge, it wouldn't have broken. This allows us to invent, plan, and feel regret. AI logic needs a dedicated counterfactual module. When an AI generates an answer, it should also generate the top 3 alternative realities of its own response. Before telling a user a plan, it should internally simulate, here is my plan, counterfactual 1. If the user is in a hurry, this step is too slow. Counterfactual 2. If the user doesn't have a specific ingredient, the entire plan fails. This allows the AI to bring up these contingencies beforehand. This is the logic that fuels creativity. The invention of the microwave oven came from a counterfactual. What if the radar waves melted this chocolate bar on purpose to cook food? Current AI struggles with true innovation because it stays inside the lines of its data distribution. A counterfactual logic engine would allow an AI to deliberately break a known rule in its simulation, just to see what happens. This is how you get a hypothesis. This is the logic of a scientist, not just a librarian. 5. Moral equilibrium. The logic of values. Finally, and most importantly, human logic is rooted in a dynamic moral equilibrium. We hold competing values, truth versus kindness, freedom versus safety, and we constantly rebalance them based on context. AI models are given rigid, top-down rules. Don't give instructions for dangerous activities. This is not moral reasoning. It's just a block list. A human-like logic system would possess a hierarchy of values it can reason through, not just a list of rules it must obey. Imagine an AI asked for advice by a friend who is being emotionally abused by a parent. A rigid AI logic says, never encourage a child to disobey a parent. A human logic says, the value of safety and emotional well-being has just outweighed the general rule of respecting parental authority. It can logically navigate the trade-off. This requires what philosophers call casuistry, reasoning case by case from paradigm examples. An AI with moral equilibrium would maintain a logical ledger. It would think, in this scenario, the usual rule of honesty is conflicting with the need to prevent cruel harm. By remaining silent or tactfully deflecting, I am not lying. I am temporarily prioritizing the prevention of harm. This is a deeply logical process of weighing and balancing that requires an understanding of nuance, not just compliance. The mosaic of human logic. The goal is not to build a machine that cries at movies, but to build a machine whose logic does not collapse the moment it leaves the neat world of numbers and enters the messy world of objects, people, and conflicting desires. A true thinking machine would integrate these 5 layers. It would simulate the physical world, feel the weight of emotional outcomes, track the limits of your mind, imagine alternatives to its own truth, and balance its own values when they clash. We are a long way from this. Current models are still, in essence, brilliant text predictors. But by wiring these human-like logic processes directly into the architecture, not as add-ons, but as fundamental ways the machine processes reality, we can move from an intelligence that is just artificially impressive to one that is genuinely, deeply understandable. And that is the kind of intelligence you could truly trust to help navigate a human life. You can save money and improve security by running AI models on your PC or Mac. Applications and models are available for free. I can help you get up and running. Contact me for a free demo. You need a PC or Mac with 16 gigabytes or more of memory. I have published more than 700 blogs on AI in the past 3 years. If you get value from these blogs, please join my Patreon as a member at the $2, $4, or $8 per month level. https://www.patreon.com/Steve Hovland. I have a new group on Facebook called GPT-4ALL by Steve Hovland. GPT-4 All is a free program that lets you run AI models on almost any PC or Mac. It lets you keep your private data private,